Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and welcome back to this next video. And this is the 10th video in the series of videos on immunology. And in this particular video, I'm going to focus on the birth of the cell-mediated immunity. Now, in my previous videos, I've told you that a lot of experimentation was going on in the early 1900s to find out the components of the immunity in the living organisms. That which components in living organisms they are providing immunity against a particular pathogen. There were two schools of thoughts. One school of thought was known as the humoral immunity, or I would say they believed in the humoral immunity. And this school of thought, they believed that there are soluble components in the serum of the blood of living organisms. They believed in antibodies, that these antibodies, they are the soluble components of the immunity, and the immunity to a particular pathogen is provided by these soluble components, by these antibodies. The second school of thought, they was believing in the cell-mediated immunity, and by that I mean that they believed that there are certain type of cells in the living organisms, and these cells, they actually provide immunity against particular pathogens, like the T lymphocytes, the helper T cells, the cytotoxic T cells. So this debate between the humoral and the cell-mediated immunity, that was there for a longer period of time. And at that particular time, the humoral immunity, that was the type of immunity that was believed in. So most of the scientists, they believed in the humoral immunity. And the reason was that if you look at the early studies of the on the immune cells, they were hindered by two major things. One, there was lack of genetically defined animal models. Secondly, the modern tissue culture techniques, that was not available. So these were the two major hindrances for determining the immune cells in the living organisms. Now, the serum, or you can say the humoral immunity, they took advantage of two things. One, the blood that was readily available. They were doing experiments on animals, and they were available with a lot of blood for experimentation. Secondly, these antibodies, as I told you, they believed in antibodies. These antibodies, they are proteins, and at that particular time, they were established biochemical techniques to purify proteins. So because of this, because of the advantages to the humoral immunity, because of disadvantages to the immune cells, the information about the cellular immunity, that lagged behind. Of course, now we know that both are correct. The humoral immunity and the cellular immunity, we require both of them for a full immune response against a particular pathogen. So how the cell-mediated immunity that surfaced then? Now in the 1940s, the Merlin Chase, who was actually working at the Rockefeller Institute, succeeded in conferring immunity against tuberculosis by transferring white blood cells between the guinea pigs. So this was one of the major important experiments that were carried out in 1940, advocating the cell-mediated immunity. So when they transferred the white blood cells between the guinea pigs, that was actually conferring immunity against the tuberculosis. So until that point, many attempts to develop an effective vaccine or antibody therapy against the tuberculosis, that was a failure. So the Chase experiments, as I've told you, that demonstrated or that rekindled interest in the cellular immunity, that these cells, these white blood cells, they are very much important. Now with the emergence of improved culture and the cell transfer techniques in the 1950s, the lymphocytes, these are actually the cells. These cells, they were identified as responsible for both the cellular and the humoral immunity. So the cellular immunity that surfaced because of the experiments of the Merrill Chase, and the improvement of the cell culture and the transfer techniques. So soon after, experiments were carried on with chickens by Bruce Glick, and they identified two types of the lymphocytes. So these two types of the lymphocytes, they were identified in chickens. The first one, that was known as the T lymphocytes, for short we call them is the T cells, and they are derived from the thymus. Second type, they are known as the B lymphocytes, and they are derived from the bursa of Fabricius in the birds. So if you look at this one, this is going to be the thymus in the birds, and this is going to be the bursa of Fabricius in the birds. So these were the two types of lymphocytes that was identified in the study of Bruce Glick in chickens. Now, when you talk about the human beings, so the mammalian equivalent of the bursa of Fabricius, that is the bone marrow, and in the bone marrow, that is actually the home for the development of the B cells. If you look at this one, this is actually the bone marrow, and this is going to be the home of developing B cells in mammals. When you talk about the T cells in the mammals, they are actually there in the thymus. But that doesn't mean that the bone marrow do not produce the T cells. The T cells are produced in the bone marrow, but they get matured in the thymus before they can perform their functions. So these are the mammalian equivalent, that in the mammals, the B cells and the T cells both are produced in the bone marrow. The B cells, they actually get matured in the bone marrow, but the T cell, they get matured in the thymus. Now we know that both the cellular immunity imparted by the T cells and that the antibodies, they are produced by the B cells. So these are the two pillars of immunity. That was the two debating things of immunity that was there for a longer period of time. So now we know that the T cell, they impart the cellular immunity, and the B cell, they provide the humoral immunity by producing the antibodies. So the real controversy between the cellular and the humoral mediated immunity that was resolved when it was confirmed that these two systems, they are intertwined and both are necessary for a complete immune response against most of the pathogens. So the controversy between the humoral and cellular mediated immunity, that is gone now, and now we are very much sure that this is the combination of the T and the B cells that provide us with a full-fledged immune system, and it protects us from different pathogenic organisms. If you like the video, please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, and we will continue the discussion in the next video.